All right, everyone. Happy Monday. It is Tara Talmadge alongside Mike Irwin, and it is time for everyone's favorite segment, Ask Mike. And Mike, as always, we are going to start things off with a COVID-19 update.
Yeah, for the past few weeks, what have we done? I've started off with bad news and then went to the good news. I don't really have any bad news this week. Yes, we had a few games canceled last weekend, but I think what you're going to see is we've now gone through the rough spot. What did everybody say? Yeah. They said, oh, if when we get to this period when the students come back to campus, that's when it's going to all derail. One guy put on one of the message boards, players are going to start dropping like flies. Well, that didn't happen. We got past that period. The truth is that numbers across the country, it's not going down fast enough for me, but the numbers are slowly declining. So I think we've gone through the worst in terms of COVID impacting these teams. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying that there won't be other games postponed, maybe even canceled as we get later into the season, but I think you're going to see less of that because I think the numbers are going down on campuses, they're going down in general. I think we've weathered the worst. And I want to take just a minute to just say that I really appreciate the work done behind the scenes by all of the people in the SEC office, the health committee, the COVID committee that they had, the doctors and the immunologists they were working with. These people got attacked on the internet. There were people, for whatever reason, oh, you don't know what you're doing. You're gonna kill players. Players are gonna give this to my grandmother. And it all turned out to really just be, they were wrong. And it was because these people knew what they were doing. They had a plan. They built in a plan, even the way they pushed the season back. They did that to allow for these students to come on campus. They knew there would probably be these many outbreaks, but they planned for that. And so now here we are game week. Now we're still not there. Sam Pittman pointed out last Friday there still has to be a test on Friday, and we don't know what happened there. Right. There's a test today, there's another one on Wednesday, and one on this Friday. So they got to clear all of those hurdles. But we got asked a question last week about minimum protocols. Some conferences had these minimum protocols, what you had to have in order to play a game, and the SEC didn't have them. Well, since we had that question last week, the SEC has come back and added the minimum protocols. And they are 53, and this is different in the SEC. In most conferences, it's just total number of players available. The SEC specified you needed 53 scholarship athletes of the 85. So that's a stricter standard. 1 quarterback, 7 offensive linemen, 4 defensive linemen. Now, all that's pretty vague, honestly. And I don't think it's really put in there as some sort of a strict, okay, this is the way this has to be. I think what they did was they put those protocols in there to bail coaches out. In other words, I'm a coach. I'm fixing to play a big game. My fans want us to play. If I say no, they're going to get all mad at me. Well, hey, we've got these minimum standards. It's not my fault. So do I think that a team could play even if they didn't meet the minimum standards if the coach wanted to? I think probably they could. By the same token, I think you may see a team meet those standards, but still the coach comes in and says, I don't think we're in good shape to play this game, and as long as you can work it out, I think they'll allow postponement. So the point that I'm trying to make about that is, though, that Hunter Yurachek, who has not released any COVID numbers since practices started, workouts started, he came as close as he's going to by saying that if Arkansas had played a game on September 5th, which was the original starting date for the season before COVID, or if they'd have played the last 2 weekends after that, in other words, the first 3 weekends of the college football season, they wouldn't have had any problem with COVID in those games. Now, that didn't mean there wouldn't be anybody under quarantine, but they could have played without an issue, he said. Now, you still got to get through, as I said, this week, and something could happen. Sam Pittman said every time they do a test, he's on pins and needles till he gets a result the next day. So, but it's looking good, and that's the good news, that we've gone through all of this. Everybody else has started to play, even the Big 12 last week, but now it's time for the SEC, the big dog, and it's about to happen, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Things are kind of trending,
we all are.
in the right direction
That's right
now. All right, let's get to our questions. The first one comes from Twinkie275, who says, the cutouts for VIP football went like hotcakes, sold out 6 hours after posting. Getting a regular football one, any chance on basketball ones or more VIP football ones since high demand? Also, can each of y'all's, Mike, Alyssa, DJ, Tara, predictions for the game? I say Hogs by 3.
Okay, let's deal with the cutouts first. They did sell out the front row cutouts.
Yeah.
But they still have more available. So you can still buy them. I think they're $50 each.
Yeah.
If you wanted one this week, you couldn't get it back in time for the Georgia game.
Right.
But the next game after that, let me check the date. Yep, that's October 17th, Ole Miss. If you put in your order now or within the next few days, you could get a cutout for the October 17th game against Ole Miss. Now, basketball, I specifically asked about that. They haven't made a decision on these little cardboard human-like cutouts for basketball because they don't know what the protocol is going to be with attendance. If we get a vaccine, as we're hearing, sometime middle or late next month or early November, it may well be that all you have to do in order to go to a basketball game, provided you've got season tickets, is to show that you've been vaccinated. And I don't know how that's going to work, but that's logical that they would do that. If you can prove you've been vaccinated and the vaccination has been approved and said, yes, this does what it's supposed to, then I could see an athletic director like Hunter Yurachek going to the governor and saying, look, we're going to fill this place up. Now, we're going to make sure everybody that gets in there has been vaccinated. So if that happens, you don't need the cardboard cutouts. So they're not ready to announce any cutouts for basketball. Now, as far as the predictions, we're not going to do that here.
Not yet.
We traditionally do that on our game day show, which we'll have our first game day show Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, KARK, KNWA, either one of those stations, and we will make our predictions, all of us.
It's going to be fun, guys. And let's get to our next question. Simper A. Hog says, on some of the video highlights of the offensive and defensive line drills, I've noticed the offensive linemen seem to push the defender away and keep a separation, where in past years, I recall them grabbing the defender at first contact. Can you give any insight into some of the technique changes we can expect in the trenches?
Well, he's right about that one. That's one change. I don't want to get into a lot of specifics, some technical stuff, but the big difference to me, and this goes all the way back to when Sam Pittman was here before as an offensive line coach, because I talked to the players back then, they're saying the same thing right now. The big deal with Sam Pittman is you go to the whistle. You don't push for 3 or 4 seconds and then stop. And you'd be surprised how often linemen do that. If you watch a game and they do these replays, you'll see a lot of times when a guy gives up a sack, he's doing a pretty good job of pass blocking, then all of a sudden he just quits and gives up a sack. So it's like strain to the whistle, go to the whistle. That's the biggest change that I've seen, and the players have talked about that. And it's really a mental mindset. You just have to convince yourself to do it.
It's just like those little things of getting on and off the field as fast as you can. It's the hustle that he wants to see from them.
Exactly.
Said76 asked, based on what you've seen and heard, what is your gut feeling about the Georgia game? Do we play a competitive game or suffer a demoralizing beatdown? Oof. This team and fan base desperately needs something to give us hope this 3-year-plus nightmare is going to end.
You know, I don't have a gut feeling about the outcome of the game other than probably Georgia would win. But I don't think you're going to see a beatdown. I mean, it could happen. Georgia's pretty good, but look, the very fact that compare the two coaching staffs, compare the assistant coaches, the two coordinators. There's just no way this team can't be better. I don't think it's possible to be worse than they were. That was the worst 2 years, not since I've been here, really in the history of Razorback football. That's the worst 2 years in the whole 120 whatever year history of the thing. And there's just no way that they don't improve. So I don't think there'll be a beatdown, and I think that's one of the things you're going to see with this football team is even when they lose games, they're going to be much more competitive than they were.
Fingers crossed. Let's hope so.
Because we got to see it. You can sit here and say you think, but until you see it, you don't know.
We'll learn a lot about the team in the first game. The Bionic Pig wants to know who was faster, Darren McFadden or Basile Shabazz? And number 2, who had the best arm talent? Was it Joe Ferguson or Ryan Mallett? Okay,
let's go with McFadden and Shabazz. I'd go with Shabazz. He was a track guy, too. He had blazing speeds. That's one of the reasons that he went with baseball. was they said he would be a tremendous base runner. It just didn't work. I don't think he could hit well enough to make the major leagues. But a guy that was faster than both of them, in my opinion, was Gary Anderson, and this is why. Anderson ran in one track meet for John McDonald. Nobody knows track like John McDonald.
Right.
40-something national championships.
It's insane.
John told me that he never had much use for football players trying to run track, but he said there's track speed and football speed are two different things. But he said Gary Anderson was the fastest starting football player he ever saw in track. And he said he was one of those guys that he just ran as fast as he had to. He said, for instance, on a relay, if he got the baton and he was in the lead, he'd have one speed. If he got the baton and he was behind, he'd have another speed. And if he was way behind,
he'd just kick it in the
he'd really have speed. And I saw him at the Tarrant County Convention Center on one of those small oval tracks. He took on a relay, he took the baton. There were only four teams out there. And Arkansas was dead last.
Yeah.
He took it halfway up the straight on one side. He went up that ramp, and by the time he finished the back straight, which was only 40 or 50 yards, he'd blown by everybody. I just couldn't believe it. It was like somebody had a rocket in his shorts, and he just went, boom. So I think Gary Anderson probably faster than both of them. The thing about McFadden was he was fast, but what made him so quick to get from point A to point B was if he saw a hole, he didn't go left, he didn't go right. It was like a bullet that just got shot toward the target. And that's why you didn't want to, as a defense, ever have a hole open up where McFadden could see the goal line, because if you did, that's where he went.
All right, and then wait, you got the arm talent, Joe Ferguson and Ryan Mallett.
Yeah, the arm talent. Look, Ryan Mallett had a great arm, but give me a break. Joe Ferguson was in the NFL for 17 years, I think.
Yeah.
There's no Arkansas quarterback, honestly, that's ever done anything like that. He's the only one that's really had a really good NFL career.
Yeah.
The reason he didn't have a great college career, Frank Broyles always went back and forth. He never could make up his mind. He always went with the trend. Like, okay, now we've got to have a running game. Let's go to the passing game. Everybody's going to the passing game. Frank called people all the time. He called coaches. He was always trying to catch on what's working right now. So he goes through this Bill Montgomery phase where you're throwing the ball, and Montgomery was a good passing quarterback. But then he's got Ferguson to come in after Montgomery leaves, but he's now thinking, I'm going to run the ball more. And Ferguson got caught up in that, and he ended up not even the starter at the end of his career. Scott Bull was the starter. Now, if you compare Scott Bull to Joe Ferguson, I mean, Joe Ferguson, NFL 17 years, Scott Bull didn't play in the. So, come on. I mean, Joe was fabulous. And plus, I'm prejudiced because he's my favorite ex-Razorback. I've even got a pair of Nike shoes that has number 11 on there.
I didn't know that.
It's got a number 11 on it for him. That was his number at Arkansas.
You have to wear those this season.
He's a terrific guy. He really is old school, fundamental football. He believes football players have to be responsible.
Yep.
There are no excuses. Don't come in and make excuses to your coaches. Yep. If you get beat, it was your fault. Do something to make sure you don't get beat the next week. He's so old school, it hurts, and I thought he was terrific.
No nonsense type of guy.
Yep.
All right, Blood Red Hog says, ASU is forced to reschedule its game with UCA due to COVID outbreaks. With the only one open date per SEC team, though, how could the SEC manage rescheduling of games, and would an SEC team enduring an outbreak have to forfeit a game if no rescheduling option was available?
Well, actually, they've got two options. The regular season is over December 5th for every team. Mm-hmm. And the way the championship game is structured, there's still a week after that. I think it's the 12th, where some of these games can be rescheduled. So you could reschedule a game on your open date, or if you couldn't do that, you can go to the 12th at the end of the season. And look, as far as forfeiting a game, the SEC has been all about, ever since this started, let's figure out a way to solve problems. They're the opposite of these people who just go, oh, we can't do this, it's impossible. So they've been the guys that rolled up their sleeves and tried to make something work. So I got to believe if you've got two teams involved and they want to play a game, but it's hard to reschedule, they'll figure out a way to do it, even if the season's basically over and you're not going to the championship game, you're not going to be in the college football playoffs, we'll still play a game even if they're bowl games. We'll let you guys finish your schedule. They'll figure out a way to make it happen.
I agree. And Little Hog 98 asks, do you think that Arkansas will win games that they shouldn't have won because of COVID-19? That's an interesting one.
I think there are all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah.
COVID becomes an X factor.
Right.
In kind of the way that the flu used to be, or the measles, or any kind of thing like that, there have been games that teams lost because they had an outbreak of some type of virus. Now, this is the ultimate virus kind of cause problems thing. I think Arkansas could win a game because of COVID. They could lose a game because of COVID. They might win a game in spite of COVID, because we've seen that happen. Or they might, the other team might have COVID and beat Arkansas in spite of the fact that they've got COVID.
You never know.
So it's just a big mystery. It's just a big X factor, and we're not going to, it's just, hey, let's just see how this plays out.
All right, our next question comes from Delta Boy, who wants to know, do you share Grant Morgan's confidence in the linebacker group over the last year?
Yeah, I think he should have confidence. He's the senior leader in that room. What do you expect him to do? Say, I don't really have much confidence in these guys.
That would not be a good look.
So he's saying the right things to show that confidence. Do I have that same confidence he has? No. I don't, because they lost their best tackler a year ago, and then they lost a guy the year before that was in the NFL and maybe the best guy from Arkansas in the NFL for a long time, and Dre Greenlaw. So they've lost some talent back there. And the big problem with those linebackers, and Sam Pittman said it when he was hired, they have a lack of speed.
Yeah.
Now, let's project that for the Georgia game, because what we keep hearing is that Georgia's not going to do this running game thing they've been doing for the last several years. They are going to an air raid offense.
Yeah.
Now, that could be a disaster for Arkansas, because what does the air raid do? Anybody remembers that Texas Tech-Arkansas game in Fayetteville a few years ago with Mahomes running the air raid? Holy moly. I mean, he was attacking the corners. He was attacking behind the linebackers. Every area where the air raid is effective is somewhere where Arkansas's got a problem with speed. So I will say that I think this team with better fundamentals will fare better because of that. But there's only so much you can do when you don't have the kind of speed, especially at linebackers, to do pass coverage. They've been working on it a lot. We've watched it, and I think they're going to do everything they can technique-wise. But that's one of the factors in this game, I think, is to see how well those linebackers. And we think there was some sort of COVID issue with the linebackers, but we don't know. We can't say for sure, because they're not releasing any numbers or anything like that. We just know some people told us there were, and were they right? I don't know. But the point is, while there were some guys apparently missing from practice, and I wasn't over there, so I can't.
Like they're all back now.
Yeah, I wasn't over there, so I can't say they were, but there were a lot of other guys that got a lot of work at linebacker. And maybe that will end up helping this team, because they're going to, now they're talking about maybe going to a 3 linebacker set, which would add an extra guy back there. You go with 3 linebackers, you're going to have at least 5 that can play. So maybe that's been what's been going all along, is to develop more depth with those linebackers. But a lot of people have been asking, what about Grant Morgan? What about Bumper Poole? It could be that they were just, the coaches knew what they could do, and they were trying to develop guys behind them.
Yeah, I think the main thing with that group, I don't know about you, Mike, is just trying not to get embarrassed like they did the past couple of years. They just look so out of sorts, not in the right spots. They just got, but we won't harp on that. Austin Hogvan asks, do you think our special teams could be good enough to keep us in the game with Georgia?
Yeah, it's possible. A.J. Reed, he's a transfer from Duke, really good kicker. Supposedly what we're hearing is he's accurate from about 50 yards in. That's pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
I looked at some of his numbers, and they were around 80% from last year. So if you're 80% on your field goals and you're kicking from 50 yards in, I'd say that's pretty effective. They got this punter, George Caratan, out of Michigan. He was at Michigan and never punted. But apparently he's been booming the ball here, so it looks like you're taken care of with regard to punts and kicks. And then Scott Fountain. I mean, Sam Pittman's been talking about this guy ever since he hired him. And people have been asking, how'd you get him away from Georgia? I don't know, but if he's not the best special teams coordinator in the country, he's close. Because if you go read the bio page from Georgia, and what he did when he was there, it's pretty impressive. I mean, his special teams, guys on those teams dominate and do well. So I think that's going to help. But do I think that's going to provide the edge in this game or other games? I think in this game, again, the edge will be what I just talked about, which was how well we were talking about Arkansas's defense. Let's reverse that now and talk about how Arkansas's offense matches up against Georgia's defense.
Yeah.
Because Kirby Smart, when he was at Alabama and the defensive coordinator, he was as solid as they come as a defensive coordinator. That's one of the things that's happened since he's been at Georgia. His defenses are always tough. Felipe Franks had a really good year in 2018. They played Georgia. He was held to about 105 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That was pretty much it. So Felipe's, he knows what these guys are all about. And Georgia won that game fairly handily over a Florida team that probably had more talent than Arkansas does in terms of offensive line, receivers, or whatever. So it's going to be a huge challenge. The one thing that might help is that Sam Pittman was at Georgia for 4 years, and every day that he went out on that practice field, his offensive line was looking at that Georgia defense. So I think Arkansas's head coach knows Georgia's defense about as well as you can know it. But knowing it doesn't mean that you'll
succeed against
those guys. So that's the biggest concern I have, and I think that would decide the game, not special teams.
The fact that Arkansas has a special teams coordinator, though, step in the right direction.
Yes.
All right, Hog Fat wants to know, based upon your perception of the work ethic being extended by both the football staff and the players, how do you project the Hogs' likelihood of being able to remain competitive for the entire 4 quarters of games this season?
Yeah, this is yet another problem that Arkansas fans know this program has had. You can go back 2 years in, the last 2 years under Brett Bielema when they blew all those second half leads. You can go under Chad Morris. Now, I'm not going to say that every single game they went flat in the second half. In some of those games under Chad Morris, it was over by halftime.
Right.
But there were definitely some games where they were competitive right there. I think of the Colorado State game that they lost. They had a lead at halftime, and then they just blew it. So that's going to be a question mark until we see that this team does not run out of gas in the second half. And that's another one of those things I think all of us are going to be looking for in this Georgia game. Any sort of sign that, they hit a wall, now it's all over, and hopefully that won't happen.
All right, our next question is from Mo Betta Hogg, who says, we know the SEC likes to protect their top horses. What will happen if COVID starts affecting several teams later this season? Will the SEC treat games differently based on who is in them?
Interesting question, and I'm just going to say maybe.
Maybe.
If you think about it, let's say that Nick Saban is undefeated and he's going up against LSU, which has 1 loss. And he's still the SEC's best shot for being in the national championship playoff. And he's got a COVID issue. And he meets the minimum standards, but he goes to the SEC and says, look, I don't want to risk something this important on a week in which we've got our starting quarterback missing, or we're missing this guy or that guy. You think the SEC is going to say, sorry, Nick, there's nothing we can do. So sure, they would probably bail him out. Now let's say Sam Pittman, Arkansas is playing Alabama, and Sam Pittman goes and says, hey, Felipe Franks, he can't play this week. Could you bail us out? I don't think so. I don't think they would.
Well, I mean, when you look at the SEC statement that they put out with the new protocols for rescheduling and stuff, there was a part that said, even if you do meet the requirements of the 53 scholarship athletes, it was like a extenuating circumstances that you could always ask for a game to reschedule.
And I think in that situation, there's no question that an Alabama or Florida or, LSU, teams like that, Georgia, they would get priority, and teams like Arkansas and Vanderbilt and Missouri and Mississippi State would just be going, sorry, you got to play.
It's just the way it is right now. But Pork Belly is our next question. He asks, for years it has seemed like our defenders were glued to blockers. Have they been working on disengaging? Please say yes.
Yeah, we've seen that. In fact, if you go look at some of the video of the D-line drills of Derek LeBlanc, LeBlanc.
LeBlanc.
LeBlanc. LeBlanc.
It's got a C at the end, but you just don't say it.
LeBlanc. He's working on that. Almost every piece of video that I've seen, and I haven't gone to any of the practices. We have one guy that goes over and shoots. That's all that's allowed in there. So I just look at the video we get. And I see that drill all the time. So I know they're working on it.
Yeah.
But guess what? Kenny Ingram, who was the D-line coach last year, they worked on that too.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you work on something doesn't mean
you'll do it in a game.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you'll do it in a game. So all I can tell you is they're working on it. Hopefully, whatever they're learning in practice, they carry to the games.
Our next question comes from Peak Hog, who asks, some tech questions for SEC games. Will they be using those worthless electronic whistles that are hard to hear, and will limited camera positions have an impact on replay angles?
Okay, basically, the whistle it's an issue. And it's obviously an issue because a lot of times these players can't hear it.
Yeah.
It's not as loud as it's supposed to be. Now, you'd think the whistle companies would be able to come back and make them louder. But so far that hasn't happened, and a lot of people have correctly pointed out this could be dangerous. I saw one game last week where the quarterback heard the whistle, but the guy doing the pass rush didn't and knocked the fool out of him. And they didn't give a penalty because they knew the guy probably didn't hear it. So it's potentially dangerous. And to me, this is another case of NCAA overkill. Think about it, Tara. These referees are tested before the game.
Yeah.
How are they going to give somebody COVID by blowing a whistle when they went into the game without it? COVID's not just going to fall out of the sky and infect them halfway through the game, and they're going to start giving it to the players. So as long as you're testing these refs and making sure they don't have it before the game starts, I don't think you need electronic whistles.
Yeah,
so if it were up to me, I'd just ditch that dopey idea. Now, the whole thing about the camera angles, that's kind of probably got the wrong impression. You might have heard that they've limited sideline photographers.
Yeah.
And specifically, we were just talking about this a while ago. Arkansas the SEC does allow photographers, local stations to have photographers, but you got to be in the stands.
Right.
Well, Arkansas apparently doesn't feel like they have enough positions there to let a lot of people do it, and even the person that sits there, if he's back there, he has to handhold his camera. Well, you just can't shoot that way. So I don't know what we're going to do in that regard, but that's all with local stations. The broadcast crew does not have those limitations.
Right.
They're going to have the same number of cameras that they always have had. Therefore, there will be the same number of replay angles, and that won't be an issue where you can't see something because they told you couldn't have a camera for COVID. That isn't happening.
That shouldn't be a concern. Blood Red Hog is actually back with another question and says that as of today, do we know with certainty if any of our projected starters will miss the Georgia game due to a positive COVID test, Mike?
No, we don't, because again, they don't release numbers. And some people would say, well, all you got to do is go to practice and look. Well, we don't go to practice this week.
That's true.
And even if you did, they have kind of discouraged us from doing that. They don't like it when you go over there and make a list of guys you don't see. So I just don't think there's any way you're going to know. You could look at the depth chart, like Arkansas's first depth chart is out there, so you could look at all those starters, and if you saw somebody that you didn't think was a starter, and all of a sudden you might say, well, obviously the guy there probably has COVID. The problem with that is that you don't know, there might be some other issue with why he's not there, or the way Sam Pittman does it, because he's very close to the vest on these things, doesn't like to give an advantage to his opponent. He might list a guy as a starter even though he's not going to start.
Yeah.
So we might not ever know if somebody had COVID, but we might not know if a starter is not going to be there until the game starts, and then you obviously see that he's not there.
Exactly.
So
to answer
just
the
no
question
way to
shortly,
know.
No, we don't know yet. River Valley Hog 55 wants to know, what is Sam Pittman's pregame speech to focus and rally the troops for the Battle of Georgia? Mike, do you have insight into that?
I don't think he's going to publish a speech on the internet. I don't think he's going to call me up on the phone and tell me what
you want to give him some tips?
What it's going to be. And my guess is it's probably not even something written down. I think it'll be off the top of his head.
Yeah.
But he's also as I said before, he's a real close to the vest guy. And Zoom's going all the way back as far as I can remember. When you try to ask him about something that was said in the locker room, he won't share it with you.
Yeah, he's close to the vest on that.
For instance, when he was talking about Felipe Franks being named captain, and he said Franks got all emotional. They didn't expect it. And he was like, I can't believe you guys are doing whatever he said. And he said, I'm not going to tell you what he said, but it was very emotional. And it's one of those moments why you get into coaching. So we can imagine that was very dramatic. Well, Sam Pittman could have told us what he said, but he didn't. He said, I'm not going to tell you. So I don't think we're going to find out what his speech is going to be unless one of the players after the game, if they were to win, might reveal whatever he said. But my guess is, one thing I think that will be in it is a yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sure that'll be.
I think that'll be in there somewhere.
Okay, and finally, we did get a question last week about block chili and Paul Eels. By the way, I had to look up what block chili was. And Paul Eels cheese dip. Do you buy block chili at just about any grocery store? But we needed the recipe.
Yeah, you want to know where we got the block chili, and you can get that just about anywhere. But we didn't know about Paul Eels.
The cheese dip.
And everything. So we got
a recipe
sent to us. Who sent it?
Here it is. Let's see. Boss Hog on Hogville provided us with this lovely recipe for block chili and cheese dip. Here are your cooking ingredients. We've got ground beef, box block chili. There's some options for you that you can get, 4-Star Famous or Ziegler's, and a pound of Velveeta. I mean, everything is better with Velveeta. Rotel, half pint of whipping cream. I'm going to say we've got to make this.
Now, we've also got the directions on that.
The directions, yeah. Brown and season the beef, add the block chili and heat thoroughly. Cube the Velveeta and add it to chili and beef. Stir until it's all melted up, and then you're going to add the Rotel and heat until thoroughly hot. Remove from heat and stir in the whipping cream and enjoy with your favorite chips.
And we are actually
I will do.
I think either you or Alyssa are going to make that for our game day.
I think we're going to leave it to Alyssa.
I think it'll be her because you're going to have work to do that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna be enjoying that Paul Eels cheese dip with the block chili, I think, on our game day show
at 10 a.m.
So we thank
nothing better.
Boss Hog. We thank him for sending us.
Yes, thank you so much for sending that. By the way, if you guys have any other like game day food recipes, we might make that a trend. We can like start making some of it here and try it out on our game day show. We'll see how that goes.
Again, I'm really excited because we're finally here.
We are finally.
And you don't know how much these people wore me out all summer. Oh, you're crazy. You think you're a doctor.
Oh,
you know, I'm not a doctor. I never pretended to be. But I'll tell you what, when you go on the internet and you read what doctors are saying, when you read what virologist or however you pronounce that, immunologist, you read all this stuff from the, from the Mayo Clinic, from the CDC websites, and you inform yourself about what's going on, how you get COVID, how to avoid it, and then you know what's being said behind the scenes. And then Sam Pittman and Hunter Yurachek were really good about keeping us informed every week about what they were doing to solve these problems.
Right.
And I just had faith in all those people. And it wasn't what I knew, it was what they were telling me.
Yep. We are in the home stretch right now. Just a few more days until Arkansas and Georgia on Saturday. But guys, thank you so much for your questions. As always, if you have any more, just hit up Mike on hogville.net. But that's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike.